My name is Ken Curry, Vice President, Chief Customer Officer for Nebraska Public Power District. So at this time, it's my privilege to introduce Duane Highley. Duane is the CEO of Tri-State G&T for Nebraska. That serves rural power districts out in the Panhandle and a little bit in the southwest corner of the state. Duane has been with Tri-State since 2019. Prior to that, he was with Arkansas Electric Cooperative. He has been with the industry about 4 decades. So with that said, think of questions. After he is finished, we will take those questions. And ladies and gentlemen, Duane Highley.
Well, good morning, and I welcome virtually everyone. I really regret that I'm not there. We had a close family member, COVID positive, so out of abundance of caution and following our protocol, I'm not live with you today, although I'd rather be. So instead, I'll just try to work through some things here. I really would hope that this could be as interactive as possible, and therefore ask that you share the questions, and I'd ask the moderator to share questions as they come in, or as you have them. I've got a PowerPoint, but it's not really the most important thing that we do today. The most important thing is just to share where Tri-State is and what we're trying to do in terms of our responsible energy transition. So, does that sound good? Moderator, sound okay? I'm going to go with yes, unless somebody tells me otherwise. So the first thing I'm going to do is do a little screen share here and just see if the slide pops up. And this is our image. Sounds good. No one's telling me otherwise, so I'm going to move forward. So Tri-State is a poorly named company because it really covers 4 states. Panhandle, Nebraska, as you can see here, and 45 total members. 42 of those members are utility members and public power districts, and goes all the way from the Mexican border at the southern end of New Mexico all the way up to the Montana border and into Nebraska. So the service area that Tri-State serves is about 200,000 square miles of some of the most remote parts of the American West. It's bigger than the state of California if you look at this footprint, but actually a lot fewer people. We're talking about serving through our members here about 1.5 million consumers. And that's a real challenge given the ruggedness of the area and the desolateness of the area in which we serve through our members. We have a lot of transmission lines and order to move that power where it needs to go compared to other companies that might have greater density. So there's 4 tenets of our strategy going forward. It's reliable, affordable, flexible, and responsible. Kind of the key words of our mission statement. They're in this order for a reason. If you look at reliability, it always comes first. And then affordability is something we're keen on because we're member owned. And what we do is all for our members that of those 42 utility members, every one of them sends a representative to our board table every month. And I get to face the people who pay the bill. I think that's absolutely the best kind of governance there can be. 42 representatives of the people who are actually writing checks to their local public power district or electric cooperative. And it keeps us as a staff at Tri-State totally aligned with the mission to serve members reliably, affordably. And then something they're asking for more today than they used to in the past is greater flexibility in power supply, and that our energy supply be responsible not only to the land and water, but also responsible to the communities that we're leaving behind as we make an energy transition. So we talk about those employees that are impacted when a plant closes or a community that's impacted. And it's very important to Tri-State that there be what we call a just transition for those communities. And I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing to help them with their transition as well. I don't expect you can read this slide just to say we do have a strategy that's structured around those 4 pillars. You can see the words there: larger, reliable, affordable, flexible, and responsible energy. But the point I make with this is just that we do have a plan. It's not without a plan. And it's all built on our mission on the bottom, kind of built from the bottom up, our values as a cooperative, as a member-owned system, and then the priorities for the association that are in alignment with what the board wants. I mentioned reliability is always job one. Last February, we had a severe weather event. It was around Valentine's Day, and you all remember it. 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th. And in Nebraska, there were some outages that were taken to keep the grid from going into a blackout status. And so unfortunately, there had to be rolling blackouts there. But for us, reliability is the number one job. That event that occurred in February was the first time in my career, and I like the way you said it earlier, 4 decades. Good grief, that's a long time. But the first time that I actually ever had to intentionally open a breaker to interrupt load and service to a member. And that is a responsibility that we take extremely seriously to keep the lights on. When the power goes out, really bad things happen. It's not just an inconvenience, it can be a life or death situation for people. And so we try to keep the lights on no matter what. And that event that occurred in February pointed out to us what things will look like actually as we move forward and have more reliance on intermittent resources. And we have to make sure we have dispatchable resources, things you can push the button and turn on, that are still part of the mix so that we don't reduce that reliability as we go forward. And I think there'll be some questions about that as we get into the Q&A. We have a goal to reduce our rates by 8% by 2023. We actually made good progress on that. We've already reduced 2% and we'll reduce another 2% next year. So that's going to be a total of 4% rate reduction. And we're really bringing in a major international financial consulting firm to go through every aspect of our business to help us find any other savings. Again, the goal is 8%. We're going to get as much of a reduction as you can. And I'd say this is amazing because as a utility, and especially after coming through the February weather event, which stressed so many utilities and caused them to have to raise rates, we're actually reducing rates. And part of that is the green energy dividend that we're seeing by virtue of the fact that we're building thousands of megawatts of new wind and solar. And that wind and solar is coming in at the lowest cost of any resource on our system. So when I think about the latest tranche, we signed up for another 1,000 megawatts of wind and solar capacity that's being built now and will be completed by 2024. That average of all those about 10 projects is 1.7 cents per kilowatt hour. So when you think about, so the fact that we can source energy for 1.7 cents wind and solar, this is as an aggregate, means that it's reducing rates to our members. It's helping put lower rate pressure. There's so few things you can do in this business that actually help you lower rates. All around us, we see inflationary pressures. We see severe weather events that are driving up the cost of power, limitations on natural gas, and the need to close coal plants prematurely. All those put upward pressure on rates. An investment alone on the coal that we've already announced to close in New Mexico and Colorado has left us with about $800 million of costs that have to be recovered that haven't yet been recovered in rates. And so that's upward rate pressure. And the fact that we can get a green energy dividend helps us make it all work in terms of affordability. Flexibility is that third pillar of our strategy. We talk about our member today want more from their power supply than just keep the lights on and make it cheap. They want the ability to self-supply or have local generation, oftentimes local community solar or local renewable project. And we now have programs in place that help our members not only do 5% wind or solar or a biomass project or a small hydro, but also now they can ask for up to 50% of their load to be served themselves rather than the tri-state. And we have 3 members that are currently in that program to give them greater flexibility in their power supply. So this is just a kind of a restatement of some of the actions we're taking in our responsible energy plan. By 2024, half of the energy that our members consume will be coming energy. Today, that is about 36%, but it's going up every hour as the new wind farm comes online. I just had the privilege last Thursday to attend the dedication of our newest wind farm, Niall, in eastern Colorado. We're eliminating all coal emissions in Colorado and New Mexico. We've already closed all the plants in New Mexico as of the end of last year, and have a plan to close the plants and the mine in Colorado by the end of this decade. More local renewables available for members to contract flexibility, and also working hard on electric vehicle infrastructure. Remember that map, tri-state is such a big part of the West where there's very little charging infrastructure right now, and people have serious concerns with the ability to drive across the mountains. And so I think it's important that we put in the infrastructure in those remote areas so that when people start to think about a cross-country trip in an electric vehicle, they know there's places they can charge. And our co-op territories happen to be the best place for that. I just got a note from Kevin Wales, and a shout out to Kevin. Thank you for helping me out. And Kevin does a great job serving as a co-chair on the Electric Sector Coordinating Council, representing the municipal sector. And he just mentioned that the price of the portfolio is maybe a glitch in my internet connection here. I'll just repeat that the energy that we're sourcing, 1,000 megawatts right now, is coming in at an average price of less than 1.7 cents per kilowatt hour if you take that aggregate mix of wind and solar that we just signed contracts for and that are now coming online. So 1.7 cents is a good price for renewables. It's a good price for anything because it represents a lower cost than any fossil fuel that we can really source at this point in time. Okay, so I think I've talked about these different things. But the other thing I'd highlight is just support for our communities. We talk about how we're helping our communities in the transition. One of the things we're doing is we're in a place where we're closing a coal plant, we're reinvesting in renewables in that local economy. So for example, in New Mexico, where we just announced the closure and close a plant at the end of last year, that had a heavy impact to that area because it was a rural community and the very best jobs in that region were coming from that plant. It also impacts the county and the schools. And if you think about the tax base that's being lost, what that means for the county. So we are reinvesting with $200 million solar project there that will provide a tax base that helps restore some of that lost tax revenue so that the schools aren't suffering or the local community college and that kind of thing. Also, we're partnering in each of the locations where we're retiring a plant with a research project with Electric Power Research Institute. And this is an indoor agriculture demonstration project. It's providing the opportunity to look at some jobs, some hope for the future, the ability to take a closed up storefront and turn it into indoor ag and eliminate food deserts, eliminate the need to ship food. Obviously, we're not going to grow all of our food indoors. There are certain niche crops that work out very well for growth in the local community, and the indoor ag makes that productivity so much higher. So I think that's the main part of my comments. I know that folks wanted to get to some questions, and I want to allow time for that. So it's yours, moderator, if you have questions you want to share. And I'll stop the screen share here at this point.
Very good, Duane.
Yes.
Any questions from anybody? I do have a couple teed up while you're thinking of them. This is coming from Ken Curry, your moderator.
Okay.
You mentioned, and so did our three predecessor CEOs, that reliability, resiliency is critical. How do you anticipate, with the continued changing in the industry to more renewables, gas following, et cetera, what's your take on keeping that reliability with your goal of 2024 being 50% cleaner energy?
Yeah, I mean, this is job one for us. As I said, we have to stay reliable, and we just can't let the lights go out on our members, especially when they need us the most. So that means we have to have a dispatchable resource to fall back on at the times when the wind and solar aren't there. I'll take February 14th, Valentine's Day. It was a very cold day across a lot of the Midwest and West. Natural gas prices went up to about 100 times their normal price. And we saw the wind turbines that we operate, where at that time we had about 400 megawatts in service. We now have about 500, but at that time we had 400. And there were 7 megawatts available on Valentine's Day. So it wasn't really doing much to help us. Now, we get good forecasts of wind, and we knew not to expect the wind that day. But that just shows you the variability that's there. Some days it's not present. And on the coldest days, tends to be the case when it gets really still and we lose that capacity. Our load in the winter, our members ask for the greatest amount of electricity in the morning when they get up and they make their coffee and they turn the furnaces up and they're getting ready for work and whatever they do. So about 7 a.m. we're hitting our peak, and the sun isn't up and shining at 7 a.m. on February day. It's just barely getting started. So from all the solar farm capacity we had very, very little solar capacity to cover that peak. So that means for today, we rely on fossil fuels. And one of the reasons we're not seeing major rate increase when other utilities are is because at the time when natural gas went up to 100 times its normal price, we have fuel units that can burn what we call dual fuel. They can burn either gas or oil. And the oil is stored on site. No supply chain problem, no pipeline concerns. And while oil is typically a more expensive fuel, and when gas goes up 100-fold, oil actually turns out to be your best option. And by switching to oil, as an example, our increase in cost over that 5-day period was about $11 million when our neighbor in the Front Range of Colorado, Xcel Energy, experienced over $600 million of increased cost for that 5-day period. So if you can compare that, you had to go and rely on natural gas and spend $600 million, or you could burn oil and only spend $11 million more. That's the way to go. And we're grateful for those fossil fuel resources because that's what helped keep the lights on. Now, state of Colorado and other states are passing regulations that require utilities to transition their energy supply. We're doing this in New Mexico and in Colorado in response to their laws. When we get to 2030, we will have more coal retired and less fossil fuels in the mix. So we need to develop another technology that behaves like a stored tank of fuel oil or a stockpile of coal on the ground, but that is 100% clean energy. And that's why we're partnered with EPRI on the Low Carbon Research Initiative. And one of the things they're looking at there is they're looking at hydrogen or ammonia as a carrier of hydrogen, as a way of storing energy on site. And of course, hydrogen can be created from electrolysis. Today, that cost is very high, and we're hopeful that we can see the same kind of technological gains in that space as was seen in wind and solar, so that we could make that a more cost-effective resource by the end of the decade.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There is a question I received via a card, and please, everybody keep thinking of questions. This question relates to the differences in Nebraska, where we are 100% public power, and you work with other utilities in other states that are investor-owned utilities. Is there any differences you would share as it relates to the working relationships in those different states?
Well, the working relationships are strong. I mean, we all know that investor-owned utilities are owned by shareholders, and the utility, works for the people who own it. Now, their business is to sell electricity to customers. So if you're an investor-owned utility customer, you're the revenue source. The reason that the states have public regulatory commissions is to put a control on otherwise the natural incentive for an investor-owned utility to do things that benefit the shareholders but don't necessarily benefit the customers. There's a tension there when you're a utility that's owned by one party but works for another, that you might have a tendency to take advantage of the customer in order to provide greater returns for your shareholders, especially when you look at the way that utility executives are compensated in the investor utility world. They're typically compensated very heavily with stock options. So raising the value of that company for the shareholders is the number one goal. Oftentimes raising the value of the company for the shareholders involves somehow getting more revenue from the customers. Maybe the customers don't want to give you more revenue. In the cooperative business model and in the public power models that you have in Nebraska, we answer to the members. And we know, in fact, I know that the local public power districts there have elected boards that sit down and oversee the financial aspects, every bit of it, of that cooperative or public power district. And it's the same thing for tri-state. The members in Nebraska send their representative to our board table. So I'm still facing someone who is a customer at the end of the line, and I have to justify every dollar we spend to them. So I think that's perfect alignment in terms of keeping us focused on reliability and affordability. We don't ever have to make a decision of, if we make this investment, is it going to benefit the shareholders or is it going to only benefit the customers? I've literally been in the boardroom of investor-owned utilities as they're considering a decision for capital investment when they said, well, we got option A, and that just benefits the customers if we invest in that, but option B would benefit the shareholders and the customers, and we think we can get that through the PUC. So, there's a tension there that's natural. Now, hopefully, at the end of the day, I think most people are good people that work for these utilities and they're trying to do the right thing, but they have a natural tension in the room. And I'm not disparaging the model. It's been very successful at bringing electricity to millions and millions of people at very affordable costs, and the United States is the model of that. But it's there's a tension, and I think we have to recognize that. In terms of working with our neighbors, Tri-State works in 8 different balancing areas, we call it. So we absolutely have to work with our partner utilities, and I feel like we do a good job of that, and and they do a good job with us. Generally, good working relationship.
Very good. Great answer. We have about 3 minutes left.
Okay.
Duane, I do have a question that I'm going to hang on afterwards. I got to pass it on to you. Any other questions from the audience? I do have one, and I support our customers, and we have a diverse customer base. You have a very diverse geographical base, 4 states, 45 different board members, and we have a couple of our board members here today, and I love you guys very much. So you have 45, and I'm sure you love them all. How do you deal with the differences of the climates amongst your 4 states?
Yeah, one of the great things about Tri-State is it's got a really diverse footprint. And every day when I walk into the office, we have photographs on the wall of our 42 utility board members that come, and you can see the diversity in their faces. It's wonderful to be able to work in such a diverse work area, but it also means we're bringing together some really different opinions. If you think about New Mexico, which has a renewable energy standard as law and wants to get greener, Colorado, which has a carbon reduction standard in law, 80% carbon reduction by 2030, those are aggressive climate goals. And then Wyoming, which kind of feels the opposite of Colorado. The 2 state capitals are only an hour and a half apart, but they couldn't be further apart politically. Wyoming actually talked about passing a bill that would kind of be a reverse portfolio standard, require a minimum amount of fossil fuels in the mix. And Nebraska, is probably more on the conservative side than on the move to green energy quickly side, but a little bit more in the middle. So with those 4 states coming together and people coming around the board table, I think we're really a model of what this future can look like. And I think we've got it, I think we've got it kind of figured out. The trick is people want reliable and affordable energy. They want it greener, but they want it reliable and affordable. And if we can deliver on those first 2, it's easy to get everyone to agree they want cleaner energy. And so the fact that we can make this energy transition, not only we're not increasing costs, we're actually lowering costs. And I think that's a pretty key to bringing everybody together.
Thank you, Duane.